The Disappearance of Emma. It was a quiet evening when Sophie received the call. Emma's trembling voice barely came through the line. "Sophie, help me," she whispered before the line went dead. Sophie stared at her phone, panic rising in her chest. Mark, her husband, noticed her pale face. "What's wrong?" he asked, stepping closer. "It's Emma," Sophie replied. "Something's wrong. I think Ryan has her." Ryan was Emma's ex-boyfriend. They had broken up 6 months ago after his possessiveness became unbearable. Emma, with her long curly brown hair and bright green eyes, had always been full of life and creativity. She loved painting and dreamed of opening her own art studio, but Ryan's obsessive behavior had cast a shadow over her happiness. Since their breakup, Emma had tried to move on, but Ryan wouldn't leave her alone. He had sent her threatening messages, and once even showed up at her apartment uninvited. Sophie and Mark had warned Emma to stay away from him, but now it seemed he had gone too far. The search begins. Sophie and Mark rushed to Emma's apartment. The door was wide open, and Emma was nowhere to be found. Her phone lay smashed on the floor. Sophie's heart sank. She picked up a piece of paper from the table. It was a note, written in Ryan's messy handwriting. "She's mine, Sophie. Don't try to stop me." Mark clenched his fists. "We'll find her," he said firmly. Mark, a former soldier turned mechanic, had a strong build and sharp blue eyes that now burned with determination. Despite his tough exterior, he was deeply loyal and protective of his family. Sophie nodded, determination replacing her fear. She was the practical one, with straight black hair and a no-nonsense attitude that had always made her the anchor of the family. We need to think like Ryan. Where would he take her? Mark thought for a moment. There's that abandoned cabin in the woods he used to talk about. Do you remember? Sophie's eyes widened. Yes. He said it was his uncle's old place. Let's go. The cabin in the woods. The drive to the cabin was tense. Sophie gripped the steering wheel tightly, her mind racing. She couldn't lose Emma. Mark checked his phone for the cabin's location and loaded a flashlight and a crowbar into the car. When they reached the cabin, the night was eerily quiet. The wind rustled through the trees and the full moon cast long shadows on the ground. They approached the cabin carefully, peeking through a broken window. Inside, Emma was tied to a chair, her face pale but defiant. Even in this state, her artistic spirit shone through in the fire in her green eyes. Ryan stood nearby, pacing back and forth, muttering to himself. His short dark hair was disheveled, and the scar on his left cheek twitched as he spoke. He clutched a gun tightly in his hand, his unstable nature evident in every movement. "We have to be careful," Mark whispered. "He's armed." A dangerous plan. Sophie's mind raced. They couldn't wait for the police. Emma was in immediate danger. Mark formulated a plan. "I'll create a distraction, and you grab Emma while he's distracted." Sophie hesitated, but nodded. She trusted Mark completely. He found an old metal pipe near the cabin and banged it against the side of the building. The loud noise startled Ryan, who turned toward the window. "Who's there?" Ryan shouted, waving the gun around. Mark made another noise, drawing Ryan away from Emma. Sophie slipped inside, her heart pounding. She ran to Emma and started untying the ropes. "Sophie, be careful," Emma whispered, tears streaming down her face. The confrontation. Just as Sophie freed Emma, Ryan turned back and saw them. "Stop!" he yelled, aiming the gun at them. Sophie shielded Emma with her body, fear gripping her. Mark burst through the door, tackling Ryan to the ground. The gun skidded across the floor. The two men struggled, fists flying. Sophie grabbed Emma and pulled her toward the door. Ryan managed to break free and grabbed the gun again. He aimed it at Mark, but Mark, using his military training, disarmed him in a swift move. In the chaos, the gun went off. The aftermath. Ryan lay on the floor motionless. The cabin was silent except for Emma's quiet sobs. Sophie held her tightly, her own tears falling. Mark stood over Ryan, shaking his head. "I didn't mean to." "It just happened," he said, his voice heavy with guilt. Sophie placed a hand on his arm. You saved us. You had no choice. They called the police, who arrived quickly. After an investigation, Mark was cleared of any wrongdoing. Ryan's possession of the illegal firearm and his actions were enough to prove it was self-defense. Moving forward. Weeks later, Sophie and Emma sat together in Sophie's living room. Emma was slowly recovering, though the memories of that night still haunted her. Sophie promised to always protect her sister no matter what. "You're safe now," Sophie said, holding Emma's hand. "He'll never hurt you again." Emma nodded, a small smile breaking through her sadness. For the first time in months, she felt hopeful. Together, they would rebuild their lives, stronger than ever. Thank you for listening to the entire story. I hope it captured your attention and emotions. If you enjoyed this tale and would like to explore more, feel free to check out my YouTube channel. If you have an idea for a story, share it in the comments. Inspire me. I'd love to bring your imagination to life. See you on the channel.